Hi, fellow friends and stargazers. In today's lesson, we will be going over the Varshaphal, which is the annual solar return in Vedic astrology. We're going to look at how to access or get to the Varshaphal in Parashara's Light 9.0. And then I'm going to show you my 13-step framework to look at the Varshaphal, where you will pretty much get everything you need to know about what's coming up in the year. If you're new to my channel, my name is Tahia. I'm a Vedic astrologer and an astro techie, and I share tips and tricks and tutorials on how to use Parashara's Light 9.0. So before we jump into a chart, let's talk a little bit about what is the Varshaphal. It's comprised of two words, Varsha and Phal. Varsha means year, and Phal means outcome. We are looking at the yearly outcome and what's to come for the year ahead. When we say the Varshaphal is the solar return, what does that exactly mean? We are looking at the position of the transiting sun returning to its natal placement. So if your sun is in Aries, where your Varshaphal will show when the transiting sun returns back to Aries. If your sun is in Taurus, the Varshaphal will show when the sun returns to its natal position in Taurus. For those of you who are familiar with the Varshaphal, you may have noticed it does not come back to the exact degree. And if we think about it, we have to take into consideration things like leap years, the Earth's elliptical orbit, and precession corrections. Nothing is ever static and things are always moving. That's why when you look at the Varshaphal, the degrees may be off, but theoretically, it's the same. So now let's look at a chart and we're going to go through how you find the Varshaphal. And I've pulled up the birth chart of another fictitious client that I called the Truth Seeker. In Parashara's Light, there's two ways to get to different worksheets and tables, etc. The first is that we can go to the menu bar and we can click on charts. And then we'll see a table with a drop down. And we're going to scroll all the way where it says Varshaphal 1. Click on that, and you'll see a preliminary layout of the Varshaphal. So that's one way we can do it. The second way we can get to this is to click on this icon that looks like a sun in a little box. And then we will see a table drop down with three different sections. The first section is called charts, and this is where you have your annual Varshaphal. The second section is called basic calculations, and this is where you have your monthly Varshaphal as well as daily Varshaphals. And then the last section called general reports is in essence reports and interpretations of the Varshaphal. Let's start with the left-hand side where it says charts, and you see Varshaphal, and there's Varshaphal 1, 2, and 3. And these are different layouts or formats in the worksheets. Below that, you will see a 1, 2, 3, and there's an L in parentheses, and that stands for location. Varshaphal 1, 2, and 3 are based on your birth location, and the ones below it with the L in parentheses are based on your current location. Below that, we have an 8-year view of the Varshaphal, and then we have an 8-year view based on your current location. Below that, we've got Tithi Pravesh, and then something called the Sahams, which are the Arabic parts. I'm not going to go into Tithi Pravesh or Sahams because those would literally warrant a separate video in understanding their complexity. So let's pull up the first one where it says Varshaphal 1, and you will see here there's two different charts. If we put a line between these two charts, this will separate and help you understand how this worksheet is organized. On the very right, we have the birth chart. It's Varga and it's Dasha. And then on the left, we have its related Varshaphal for whatever year you're looking at. And then we also have the Vargas and then the Varshaphal Dasha. So that's how this worksheet is organized. And let's remember, the Varshaphal is a transit chart at the time of your birthday, when the sun returns to its natal position. The reason I like keeping the birth chart up here is because the birth chart is the foundation. The birth chart gives you the design of the house you're going to live in, and the Varshaphal is the room that you're living in for that year. I know this can be a complex topic, and I want to just make sure you understand the foundation and the very basics. Now let's go into this 13-step framework that I've created that will help you understand the Varshaphal. 13 may sound like a lot of steps, but they go pretty quickly. And also, they will literally give you everything you need to understand what's going on in that year for you or for your client. Step number one is we're going to look at the position of the sun. This is critical because the Varshaphal is all about when the sun returns to its natal position. We're going to look at the sun in the birth chart, and we see it's in the seventh house in the sign of Aquarius. Now, it's always going to be in the sign of Aquarius in the Varshaphal, regardless of the year. What will change is the house that it's in. I also wanted to add that looking at the Varshaphal is the same whether you are on a Mac or a PC. I forgot to say that in the beginning. Let's get back to our chart. The sun is in the seventh house in Aquarius, and we can see in the Varshaphal, it moves to the fourth house. And sort of like anything in Vedic astrology, when you look at planets and how they change from either the birth chart to the Varshaphal or to a Varga, it's kind of like playing hopscotch. You've got to jump around to see where you're going to land next. We see from the birth chart to the Varshaphal, the sun has moved 10 houses. So a couple of things here. The sun in the Varshaphal, the house that it's in, is where it's going to be lit up. It's going to show a clear focus for the year. Given that it's moved 10 houses, we can start to assume there could be a theme of finding a purpose, changing a career. And because the sun is in the fourth house, this could mean that this could either impact where the person lives, or the person may move and find a new career or a job or a sense of purpose. And I'm breaking this down very simplistically just so you can follow me through this. So that's point number one. Where is the sun in the natal chart and how many houses does it move to? You can also look at the other planets that are with the sun, which in this case are Mercury and Saturn. And you can also check if there's other aspects to the sun. And in this case, there actually are no other aspects to the sun. And I'm talking from Parashara's aspects. And we see the sun is with Mercury and Saturn. Mercury here is considered a malefic. So you can start putting your story together and saying that there has been an impact to the person's career. And this is further emphasized because the sun rules the 10th house in the Varshaphal chart. With Saturn, there could be delays in making this move or just some sort of hesitation in trying to figure out the next step. Step two is then looking at the ascendant in the birth chart and seeing where it goes in the Varshaphal. And that's what I just went over. The ascendant in the birth chart goes to the 10th house in the Varshaphal. We see here another layer adding that this is something to do with career. And we can also say that the sun, Mercury, and Saturn are aspecting the 10th house in the Varshaphal. Step number three is we look at the Varshaphal ascendant, which is Scorpio. And we see in the natal chart, Scorpio is in the fourth house. This also tells us that there is some movement, dynamic change with fourth house things. We can also see what is aspecting the ascendant in the Varshaphal. We see that Saturn has a 10th aspect, and we know Saturn's 10th aspect can be about career. And then we see that Rahu is also aspecting the ascendant. With Saturn and Rahu aspecting the ascendant, we can assume that this was not necessarily an easy decision. There may have been more money, there could have been some incentives here, but deep down, this was just not an easy decision, or it's not an easy decision in the making. Step number four is looking at the Lord of the Varshaphal ascendant. So the Lord of Scorpio is Mars, and we see it's in the 8th house. It's also a retrograde Mars. Retrograde planets in the Varshaphal will cause delays, will cause hesitation. Things may not transpire the way that they were initially thought to. Anytime you see a retrograde planet in the Varshaphal, just know that there is going to be some sort of delay in the event coming to fruition. What adds to this is that it's in the 8th house, which in its most simplest form and definition is a house of transformation and change. And what it transforms and change, in this sense, this is going to change the individual. We also see the Lord of the 8th is in the 4th. We're getting more and more hints, more and more influences that this is heavily rooted in the individual making some kind of market change to career, which is going to impact where they live. And furthermore, we can see that Mars influenced the 11th house of gains, desires, networking. It also influences the second house, which is about money and resources, as well as the third house. The third house, in essence, is also a house of conflict and difficulties. And you can see we are getting more confluence here. So, what is confluence? Confluence is when you have more than one factor that influences a concrete outcome or event. Step number 5, we're now going to look at what's called the Muntha. The Muntha is a critical part of the Varshaphal. The classic definition is that it's the progressed ascendant, but what the heck does that mean? In your natal chart, when you're born, the Muntha is in your rising sign or your ascendant. And every year from that point, it moves one house. It will take 12 years to get back to your ascendant. The house the Muntha in changes sequentially every year. For example, we can see the Muntha for this year for this person is in the sign of Sagittarius, which means last year it was in the sign of Scorpio, and next year it will be in the sign of Capricorn. So, what exactly is the Muntha? This is the area of the chart where you will be very engaged. You won't be sitting in the sidelines. You won't be observing this. This is where you're actively engaged in during the year. The Muntha in the second house is considered a good position. I've enclosed a cheat sheet that you can find in the link in the description that I'm calling your Varshaphal cheat sheet. And it's going to give you a list of what the Muntha does in different houses, as well as this 13-point framework that I've created. Let's think of this logically. The second house is the house of resources, wealth, your immediate family. It's what you're putting in your mouth. It's the house of speech. The Muntha in the second house could allow this person with this potential move to make more money. It could give this person a platform to speak that would be part of this career movement. We can say that the sun in the fourth house is where the chart will light up, and the Muntha allows us to turn the switch on. The Muntha can give this person the resources to make this move. We can also look at aspects to the Muntha. We can see a retrograde Mars is directly aspecting the Muntha, which means that there could be some sort of delays for this person to actually make this move. Step number 6 is the Muntha Lord. The Muntha is in the sign of Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. And where is Jupiter? It's in the 7th house. We could say that there could be some influence from either their partner, a guru, a teacher, an advisor, and how this move is made. Yes, the 7th house is your house of partnership, but also remember it's the house of other people. In making this move, the person could have been influenced by a teacher, an advisor, that this would be the best for this person because it would give them a better platform for their voice. And by speaking, they may be able to earn more money. I'm kind of going with the flow of this chart, just looking at it. But these are the sort of things I want you to think about when you look at the Muntha and the Muntha Lord. Step number 7 is what's called the Year Lord. The Year Lord is another reference point in the Varshaphal, and you can kind of almost think of it as like the CEO of the chart. The way we find the Year Lord is we're going to go back up to this icon with the sun, and we're going to click on the second one called Varshaphal 2. And you'll see here, there we see the same Varshaphal as the table that takes up the most room here. And then we have other parts of Vedic astrology that are here. We've got Shadbala, Varshaphal strengths, and the Year Lord. Varshaphal strengths are basically telling us the energy and activity of the planet. The reason I didn't start with this is because I always like to compare the Varshaphal to the birth chart. But here you get information about the Year Lord. And you can see here the Year Lord is Venus. So we're going to go back to our other chart and we're going to see, well, where is Venus? Venus is in the 5th house. It's with Rahu. What this can tell us is that the person's desires were really strong. They're making this change under the belief that this is really setting an amazing stage for them. I know the very typical Venus Rahu is that there's foreigners involved here, and I'm not going to dispel that. But I will say also, just think of it in the larger scope where Rahu adds an illusionary aspect to this. And this could mean that this person is really motivated and has a strong desire and almost sees this as an unorthodox path that they wouldn't otherwise take. I do want to add another point about Venus being the Year Lord here. You will notice that Venus is with Rahu in the 5th house and it's exalted. This person may be in a love affair where they got involved with somebody that's completely different, not usually their type. It's a very unconventional relationship. And this probably is going to have a big part in their decision making process to move, change careers. They may be moving because of this new person in their life. Venus also rules the seventh and the 12th house. This does add the foreign, non traditional. This could be somebody who breaks their usual patterns. These are creative or romantic entanglements that feel unusual or atypical. Because Venus is the year lord, I would say that this could have a very dominating influence to how this person is going to make decisions. I know Venus with Rahu usually tells an individual that they're involved with somebody foreign, but I wanted to take it a little bit out of the usual scope to show you what it could mean, but also how it could influence the decision making process. The other thing to note too is that Venus and Rahu in the fifth house is 8 houses away from the 10th house. Anything eighth from a house is going to show where the change or the break can occur. So the story gets bigger, it gets more pronounced with Venus and Rahu, 8th from the 10th house. You can see how each time we look at another reference point in the Varshaphal, it adds more color, adds another layer, and really can compound or influence the story that we are creating. Step number 8 is looking at the Lord of the Year Lord. And I know that's a mouthful. The Year Lord is Venus. The Lord of the house that Venus is in is Jupiter, because Jupiter rules Pisces. And we've discussed that Jupiter could be the advisor, teacher, partner, influencing this person to make this decision. And the next thing I want you to think about is the Mahadasha Lord. And this is going back to the Vimshotri Dasha in the birth chart. So we can see here by this little circle that Saturn is the Mahadasha Lord. And I showed you how to highlight the Mahadasha Lord in another video that I'll link below. But what we want to do here is see, where does the Mahadasha Lord go in the Varshaphal? And we see that it goes into the 4th house. And we also see it move from Taurus to Aquarius. And if we look at that here, we can see that that moves 10 houses. Our theme is getting compounded of 10th house, 4th house moves. Step number 10 is we want to look at the Bhukti Lord. That is the moon. And we see the moon is in Virgo in the birth chart in the 2nd house. And we see that the moon is in the 1st house in Scorpio. And we see that this has moved 3 houses. 3rd house in general is about conflict. It's about making hard decisions. It's also short travels. And the 3rd house is 12 to the 4th. And now we're down to the last 2. Step number 10 is we're going to look to see where the Yoga Karaka is. For Leo rising, Mars is the Yoga Karaka. It rules the 4th and the 9th house. And Mars is in a retrograde position in the 8th house. Mars is in Sagittarius, and in the Varshaphal, it's in Gemini. And you can see the 1-7 relationship. We can see again another theme of partnership or other people influencing the person. And I'm going to start sounding like a broken record because you can see the story is really adding up here. Step number 12 is look for a cluster of planets. Anytime you see a cluster of planets in the Varshaphal, you can bet on the change coming from that house or the house that's exactly opposite. You can see here in the 4th house, we have 3 planets. It's looking directly at the 10th house. Again, we are telling the 4th house, 10th house story. Point number 13 is retrograde planets. And we can see here Mars is retrograde. It rules the 6th house and the ascendant. This is about work, service, some sort of delays that are going to be influencing work as well as the individual's decision. That is my 13-step reference. And if you use this and go through it logically, you're going to have a really good idea of what is going on in either your Varshaphal, your client's Varshaphal, for you to be able to say, this is probably going to be the big theme of the year. We're going to go to that other screen we initially went to. We see here in this chart, we have a section at the very bottom that we referenced earlier, finding the year lord. And we have the year lord, the Muntha, and then we have something called the Pancha di Karis. I am probably just killing the pronunciation on that, so forgive me. Pancha means five, and Dikaris means authorities. These are, in essence, the five authorities or reference points in the Varshaphal. We've already gone over the Muntha Pati, which is the Muntha Lord, the Janma Lagna Pati, which is the Lord of the ascendant in the birth chart, the Varshalagna Pati, which is the Lord of the ascendant in the Varshafal. We have two others that I personally don't use, but just to continue our explanation, it is called the Tri-Rashi Pati. Tri means three, Rashi means signs. So this is referring to a planet that rules over three areas, which includes the Muntha, the sun, and the Varshafal ascendant. And that can be a little confusing because it's basically saying one planet, in this case, Venus, has sort of an umbrella over these three different areas. And sometimes the Tri-Rashi Pati can be the year lord, but it's not always the case. The last one, called the Dina Ratri Pati, this is the ruler of the time of the solar return, whether the solar return occurs in the morning or the evening. And again, guys, I don't put a lot of emphasis in the last two because from that 13-point structure, I pretty much can get so much information. And once you get into the habit of going through those 13 points, it's going to be very clear to you what the theme of the year is. I know the other thing that you're probably thinking about is the Varshaphal dashas. How do you find that? There's two main types of Varshaphal dashas. We are going to double click here. And you will see this brings up our dasha table. And right where I'm zooming in, you see you have three types of Muda dashas and then a dasha called the Patyanini. I usually use the Muda based on the moon in Varshaphala. You can also use the Patyayini, which incorporates the ascendant as part of its dasha sequence to give the idea of more concrete results. I will say this, that the Varshaphal with its dashas can be a little bit of a hit or miss, and that's usually because the Vimshotri dasha of the birth chart is the presiding factor. So always remember the birth chart is the presiding factor here. I'm going to leave it on that and we're going to click OK. And we can see that this listed very similarly to how we see the Vimshotri in the birth chart. I will say from my personal experience, usually events occur in the dasha of Rahu or they will occur in the dasha of the planet. The dasha of Rahu, especially if Rahu is with the Muntha, is going to give some sort of event for the person. There's another concept called the mouth of Rahu or the tail of Rahu. One of the things we'd like to check is if it's in the mouth or the tail of Rahu. Essentially, you can kind of think of this as before and after. I'm going to make this example up. If Rahu is at 20 degrees of Aquarius and we have the Muntha that is at, let's say, 23 degrees of Aquarius, the Muntha is moving towards Rahu and it's going to be swallowed by Rahu, which means that the event could be very intense. It could be very overwhelming, could be unexpected. Now, if the Muntha, let's say, is at 15 degrees, so it's past the degree of Rahu, and this is called the tail of Rahu or when it is burnt. And this has other effects which destroy either the house or its signification. That's another piece of information that you want to put in your toolbox that can help you understand when you see the Muntha with Rahu. Okay. The other thing I want to talk to you about is just going back here. And we went over charts 1 and 2. Chart 3 is another worksheet format, and there's different elements on here. We have here the Varshaphal in a bigger format, the bar chart to the top, an empty space here that you can probably add a chart, something called the Kakshas, which is part of Ashtagavarga, and then you have planetary information here. You have the same format repeated for the location or local Varshaphal. Then you have something called the 8-year overview, which is pretty cool. It shows you your birth chart at the very top left, and then 8 years of the Varshaphal, so you can have a sort of one-stop shopping, quick glance at what could be happening in the next 8 years. And like I said in the beginning, I'm not going to go over Tithi Pravation Sahams in this video. I want to move to the second column, which is the monthly solar return. And this is if you want to look at your solar return month by month. I will say this one is a little bit of a hit or a miss. I've seen it work really accurately some months and then not so accurately other months. but it is an option that kind of can break down the Varshaphal into literally 12 different charts where you can see month by month what's going on. The month by month is a transit chart. There is also a daily solar return, and this shows you almost on a daily basis what your Varshaphal could look like. And just keep in mind, this is a daily transit snapshot as well. And here we have something similar that we saw in the 8-year overview. This is a solar return 3-month overview. And you can see here we have the birth chart at the top, and then we have a 3-month overview here of the solar return in a monthly format. And below it, we have it in its location format. And then we have the Varshaphal dashas, which I just went over. And this will give you a snapshot of all the dashas in one place. So you can actually compare and see which works for you. You have the overriding Vimshotri dasha on the top, and then you have the Varshaphal dashas, starting with the Patyayini, and then the 3 types of Muda dashas. Under general reports, you have the Tajika Yoga summary. There are 16 yogas, and Tajika yogas are from Persian or Arabic astrology. If you go back to our little square here, and you go to Tajika Yoga Summary, and this just tells you if the yoga is present or not. It doesn't really explain it. The Tajika yogas are 16 yogas that have what's called a separating or applying aspect. And what that means is a planet moving towards another planet, or is it moving away from? I don't personally use all 16 in here. I will literally look at the moon and see if the moon is moving towards a planet or has already passed the planet. And if it's moving towards the planet, it will tell me about an event that's going to transpire. And if it is past the planet, it may have occurred in the past, or there may be delays or just some sort of blocker for that event occurring. The middle one. And this is the Tripataki chakra. And this looks like it talks about Vedas. The last one here called chart interpretations, this can give you an explanation for what's going to go on in the year. You do have to note at the very bottom where you can either click on today for your current Varshaphal, or you can select age and pick another year here. And you can also move this back in time 1 year ago or 1 year ahead, and you can go ahead and look through this. Just keep in mind, this is from the scriptures, and sometimes they can be a little bit sort of black and white, teeter-tottering with a little bit of gloom and doom. And sometimes it can be a little bit contradictory where it says the Muntha will be something and then the year lord will be something else, and both meanings sort of contradict each other. I'm going to go back to our original chart. The very last thing I wanted to show you is if you double click right here, you will see a table pop up that we just saw, and you can move backwards or forwards in time here with years as well as months and days. If you want your current Varshaphal, you just click on today and click OK. I hope that was helpful in giving you a little bit more perspective if you haven't worked with the Varshaphal before, or if you have, how you can interpret it. I really encourage you to go to the description, get the link, and start practicing, whether it's on your chart or somebody you know, just to get a better understanding of the year and what is to come. Thanks so much for listening. Keep shining your light, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.